All right. Hey, everyone. This is Matt Netko with Ionic, and we are here to talk about integrating your CI/CD pipelines with Appflow. I am Matt Netko, head of product marketing here at Ionic, and joining me is Matt Kramer, director of product management. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Hey everyone, going well?
Got a nice shirt you put on there today.
Yeah,
We did
we're
not
we're
coordinate this.
twinsies.
We exactly. We
Yeah,
are
this
the
was
Matts.
uncoordinated for real. But the question I actually have is, why is your picture first?
Well, I'm starting, so
Okay, sounds good.
the eternal battle between the Matts. All right, great. We have an action-packed agenda for everyone today. We're going to give a brief Ionic intro. Chances are you know who we are if you're joining this particular webinar, but we'll kind of give a high-level overview. And then we're going to be talking about how to build apps at scale in the vein of using and tackling this with mobile CI/CD. And then, of course, the main event, we're here to talk about the new Appflow integrations that we're rolling out with other CI/CD platforms. Very exciting stuff. And we'll have a live demo with Matt here in Azure DevOps and combining that with Appflow. And as Matt mentioned before, please, in the side panel, list your questions in the Q&A. We'll have plenty of time for that at the end of the presentations, but you can leave them any questions at any time. So let's get to it. So just a quick intro about who Ionic is and what we're all about. So we are the leading cross-platform dev solution today. And our approach is all about embracing web technologies and helping web developers take their skills and build for mobile, desktop, and beyond. So we embrace a web-first approach, which is, of course, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, all the building blocks of the web, and allow you to build cross-platform apps from one code base that run everywhere. We are powering now, having been around for several years, we're powering over 15% of apps in the app stores and thousands upon apps that are in internal app stores or company-facing internal applications. So we run the gamut in terms of use cases across all industries and all different types of stores and things like that. And as a result, we've got a great global community of over 5 million developers worldwide using Ionic and our tech. So really great stuff. On top of that, we in recent years have become the leader in enterprise app development with because of the ubiquity of web technologies and our products and open source tech. It's, regardless of what industry you're in, as you can see here, building with Ionic is a great choice to tackle your app backlog. So you'll probably recognize that all these different logos across all different types of industries and technologies that are building with Ionic in our platform. So let's talk about building applications at scale, and one particular area of this, which is automation, of course, because like all of us here probably today, we all have challenges keeping up with our app backlog and delivering on solutions and keeping up with the pace of technology today. So one particular quote we love to share that's unfortunate that comes from Forrester, which along with Gartner is, kind of the ones that are working with enterprise customers day to day and especially enterprise software teams in the trenches. And what they've found is, unfortunately, the average enterprise team ships code and new software releases an average of 4 times a year or less. So quarterly, maybe even twice a year. And, that's not great. That is not an ideal situation to be in this modern day and age of technology and customer development, right? And why this is, right? Why is this? Well, the main issue is we can't tackle our app backlog. So as you know, we're all of our companies, regardless of what industry you're in, we're all becoming software companies or have to adapt and integrate and build up software development teams, right? And unfortunately, the demands that are placed on us as development teams, project managers, and really all product teams are always increasing. They're never going down, despite advancements in technology and how fast we can move and the great tools we can build. That's still a challenge. So when we look at tackling our app backlog, this is the number one challenge with not being able to ship quickly. And because of that, when we have slower releases, where we're only every few months putting out new code and new software, that translates into slow feedback from customers. So really, how do we know that we're building the right solutions for our customers if we're not only talking to them from that side of things, but actually releasing software that we can talk to them about and gather that feedback. Ultimately, what that leads to is disappointed customers and being left behind in your particular industry and from a competitive standpoint. We also like to say, generally, if you're not shipping, you're not learning. So keep that in mind. And when we look to the one main secret that is really wrapped up in all of this, how we tackle this, building apps at scale, we look at several different ways of doing this. And of course, Ionic, we like to think we tackle all of these and offer these. So of course, the first two being web technology, right? Using your web development team to just absolutely crush your app backlog, deliver compelling experiences to your customers and users is super important. And along with building with open source technologies, right? So open source has taken over the world, especially in the web ecosystem. There are so many great solutions that you can leverage to build your applications much faster and really reuse a lot of those building blocks. And then finally, when open source and building for the web are those base building, pyramid building blocks, you have companies like Ionic that you can turn to and partner with to kind of bring that last 10, 20% to the finish line and develop and deploy world-class app experiences. So when you work with us, we have pre-built enterprise-ready solutions for oftentimes security and authentication and other types of reusable components that you could build but are not a great use of your company's time. And the last secret is working and partnering with a company that has that knowledge and experience, in-depth experience, to provide you with world-class support and often advisory services, right? So that kind of holistically is the secret there. The last part of this, though, that we're going to talk about today and focus in on is continuous integration or continuous delivery, CI/CD. And most everyone here probably knows what that is at this point, but just kind of high-level goals of what and how this works is, really the goal is to develop high-quality software quickly and at scale, right? So this is all about, and you can see why this fits back into our mantra of tackling that app backlog, right? Because ultimately how we do this is automating our app delivery processes, all those repeatable steps that we could be doing manually, but that suck up a lot of time and distract us from building great software and iterating on it, right? And speaking of iterating, one of the goals here too is to continuously test and then integrate those apps into our platforms, into third parties and things like that. And how we do that is basically perform a bunch of common tasks around building and deploying applications upon every commit, like a new feature or bug fix that a developer delivers to a centralized code base. And when we look at kind of, I love this infinity sign here in way of looking at CI/CD and developer operations or DevOps in practice, right? It's an ongoing process that never ends, where you have developers writing code at any given point. You have your QA team testing that code or a previous version of that code, giving the go ahead to release it out into the wild to your customers' hands or maybe your stakeholders. And you have a product manager here like Matt that's going to be monitoring it and gathering feedback from customers, and then he'll start to plan what's next, and that all feeds back into code, test, plan, deploy, all of that. So great way of looking at that. And ultimately, why is CI/CD important, right? Because really, again, what we're trying to do is an emphasis on speed and making sure that we can ship code quickly, learn from those, whether it's talking to customers, getting that feedback, or from the automated technology, maybe looking at error logs and adapting and fixing bugs, or all those types of things. Because when we speed up our feedback loops between dev to product to customer, right, we can iterate faster, we can get feedback faster. And ultimately too, when we look internally at team dynamics, CI/CD encompasses when you do it well, and you have to do this, you have to get your entire development team working together, which improves collaboration, ultimately improves the quality of your products if they're moving in lockstep, delivering software. All right, so next let's look at mobile CI/CD in the vein of automation and Appflow, which we'll be talking about more today, specifically because mobile has its own challenges and issues that can get in the way of shipping quality software, right? And these are unique to mobile, given what we have to deal with there compared to shipping on a desktop web app or perhaps a desktop app or mobile web app. And some of these things are mostly related. A couple of them are related to approval processes that could slow down our delivery, right? From internally our own companies, you might have stakeholder approval, and that could be anything from your QA team to business analysts and other teams that need to give sign off, especially because of the advent of mobile, we can have which is great. We can have everyone test on their device, but that might lead to some slowdown in the release process, right? You also have the App Store approval process, most notably from Apple, taking oftentimes several days to approve software releases. And then when you look at build environments, especially building for iOS and Android, you have now over 10 years plus of legacy versions to worry about, hundreds upon thousands of devices to test for, and things like that. And not to mention, more so in the on the approval side of things, when you have your trying to test all those different devices, right, you might run into issues late in the development or deployment process, which means you have to start all over with testing, maybe going back to dev to fix things and then go through the whole deployment process. Specifically, again, in terms of mobile CI/CD challenges going a level deeper, a lot of these items are just frankly with the audience that we work with, which again is empowering web developers to take their skills to mobile. There are a lot of these different categories that they have to learn, whether they're working with Ionic or any other cross-platform technology. And these include things like just honestly native technology knowledge, right? Just understanding how mobile ecosystems work and the tooling around that. How to manage and maintain SDKs and Xcode, Android Studio, all the tools that go into that. Additionally, because of the way that mobile devices work, we have to have a very high bar of security to think about with certificates, deployment provisioning profiles. All of that can be a headache for those that are not used to that and are used to just deploying new versions on the web. It's much more simple for sure. And again, device testing across hundreds of devices can be difficult when you have users submitting very specific issues for a manufacturer, maybe an iOS or Android version, and on and on. It can be quite complicated to reproduce and narrow those issues down. And so when you look at what the automation process, the CI/CD process around mobile, there's a bunch of demands that we have to think about, which all of these are trying to roll your own and manage them yourself, whether it's a DevOps team or if you're on a smaller team, maybe the web and or mobile team manages these concerns, is quite a bit of a pain, because again, they take away from actually building and keeping that feedback loop going as part of the CI/CD process. So you have things like, again, managing your build environments across iOS, Android, and the web, and perhaps other backend services, APIs. I mean, it goes beyond that. Managing servers and infrastructure. So of course, you have to use a Mac to build for iOS. That's a big one that comes up a lot, is managing and buying those devices. And then again, we mentioned the certificate and profile management along with tooling that you have to keep up to date. We have yearly releases at least from iOS and Android, not to mention different versions of Xcode, Android Studio that you have to manage and maintain and make sure your apps are compatible with as they are released. And then of course, different deployment channels. So every company is going to be different when it comes to their CI/CD pipelines, but often you'll have something like moving from different stages of development to QA to production, and all different types of other deployment channels from there. So with that, now Matt's going to take over and talk about Appflow, which is Ionic's mobile CI/CD platform, which aims to take care of all these challenges and issues we just talked about. So why don't you take away, Matt? Thank you.
Hey everybody, thanks for dropping by. If we could go to the next slide. I really wanted to start off before we dive into this stuff, telling you guys that when it comes to mobile CI/CD, I know Neko just talked about a lot of things that are difficult about this process, right? Kind of managing all the infrastructure, different versions of Xcode, like all that stuff. I just wanted to kind of give you guys some evidence in that you're not alone in trying to solve this problem. I would say, every day, large organizations call us who are already doing CI/CD. Maybe they're already using something like Jenkins, but they've only ever done it for the web. And so they call us looking to figure out, like, how do I do the mobile part of this CI/CD? So that's very common. If that's the boat you're in, like that, we're here to help you get through that. We also talk to people that have kind of attempted to go on this journey already. People who have quite literally, maybe like every other week, we hear about someone who has a Mac Mini sitting in a janitor's closet, and it's like a Fortune 1000 company trying to figure out how to get their Mac builds up and running in CI/CD. We're here to help you guys get to a point where mobile CI/CD is easy for you. That's the whole goal of Appflow. So the way we do that is, first off, you don't need to have any prior mobile CI/CD experience, right? If you kind of don't know how to go and get a Mac build machine up and running, or Mac VMs or anything like that, or scaling the infrastructure, don't worry about it. Appflow helps you with that out of the box. We've built this explicitly to be super easy platform for Cordova and capacitor applications that's tailored to your needs as a web developer trying to get mobile CI/CD in your organization. And then, like I mentioned earlier, if you're coming to the table with Jenkins, with Azure DevOps, or anything else, we now integrate directly with those services. We'll get to that in a second, but you don't have to abandon your tool chain to come start using some of Appflow's features. So let's dive in a little bit to each feature of Appflow, just to give you an idea of what we bring to the table when you're using us with your CI/CD platform. The first is native app builds. So you can connect your repository to Appflow. We take your source code and we turn it into a native binary. That's, an IPA file on iOS. It's an APK or an AAB on Android. And we do that all without you having any infrastructure to maintain. We have something called build stacks that we update every single time a new version of Xcode or Mac comes out, or any of the dependencies related to Android, like the Android SDK version. We're updating these build stacks all the time so that when you come in to build a native binary in Appflow, you just say, give me the latest build stack with the new stuff that Ionic manages for me. We'll boot up a completely clean machine for you, perform that build, and then destroy that machine. So it's all single use, very secure infrastructure that you don't have to worry about. And that obviously scales on demand with our customer base. So you give us your source code, we can get you back those native binaries very quickly, very easily. And that's something you can utilize from any system. It doesn't have to be a Mac. Up next, we have App Store Publishing. App Store Publishing is the final mile. So you have that native binary ready to go. Let's say it's an IPA file for iOS, and your goal is to get it into App Store Connect, into test flight, play with it a little bit, and then deploy it to production. Getting that binary and automating that distribution through to App Store Connect is pretty difficult. So App Store Publishing takes the binary you built with our native build service, and with one click or some simple automation, gets that binary where it needs to go. That could be test flight, production iOS App Store. It could be Google Play Beta. Super easy to get up and running, automating App Store Publishing. Up next is really a superpower of Cordova and capacitor applications, something called live app updates or live updates. And what this allows you to do is take any of the web content in your application. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images, videos, anything like that, even like a JSON file that's stored locally, right? Anything that's in that web directory inside your Cordova capacitor application, we can push an update to that automatically. So you can get an instant bug fix out to production. One of my favorite stories here is actually Breeze Aviation. They're a brand new airline that uses live updates, where they launched their airline and some of their developers were actually flying on the planes like all day to test out their app and see what issues would pop up. And on their last flight of the day, it had a delay that was improperly entered, and the app actually had the flight disappear from everyone's phones. So all of a sudden, everyone who was waiting to get on this plane and get home, because the delay was incorrectly entered, no longer could see their boarding pass, couldn't get on the plane. And so the product manager, kind of sitting in the literal airplane terminal waiting for that flight, called home base, said, hey, let's get out a fix for this right away. They programmed a fix to bring the flight back to the application, the boarding passes back to the application, hit go on a live update, and everyone's apps updated in the terminal. Everyone could get on the plane. Everyone could go home without a hitch. So this live update service really exists for you to push out kind of critical bug fixes, small new features on the fly without having to go through like a 3-day process when something's super critical for you. And then this one, let's talk about this real quick. So let's say your organization doesn't have any sort of CI/CD system right now. You're not using Jenkins, you're not using, Bitbucket pipelines or Azure DevOps. You're very new to this. You just have your repo sitting on like GitHub. Appflow does have built-in CI/CD automation workflows. So if you want to say, hey, watch for everything on my main branch, my staging branch, and then automatically trigger an iOS build and send it to test flight, you can set that up all in Appflow. Now, this isn't exactly what we're talking about today, but I just wanted to call it out as a feature that's available for you to use if you haven't got other systems set up. So in terms of kind of taking that and going the next step, what we're going to talk about here is integrating the 3 features I just talked about into your existing CI/CD automation tooling, like Azure DevOps. So when we look at this, I think before we started talking about how, the average enterprise company is only shipping like a couple times a year. People using Appflow, the average Appflow user is shipping 3 to 4 times per week when they've gone and kind of automated this entire process. That's from the 2020 Ionic developer survey. So we're really here to help you expedite this process and go a lot faster. Now, when it comes to why we're here specifically today, talking about Appflow's new integrations with other CI/CD tooling, the question we started to get from a lot of our enterprise customers was, hey, how can I use live updates with my existing CI/CD tools, right? Do I have to adopt Appflow automations when I just want to use live updates in Azure DevOps? Like, do I have to fully adopt Appflow, or can I just use the live updates feature with my existing tool, or the native builds, or the App Store publishing with my existing tool? So with that, today I'm happy to announce that Appflow integrates directly with other CI/CD platforms through our CI/CD integrations. So let's talk a little bit about how that works. What we're really talking about here is taking the 3 features I just went through, so live updates, native builds, App Store deployer, app publishing, and combining them with your existing infrastructure. So maybe use Jenkins, Travis, CircleCI, GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, Azure DevOps. The list goes on. I think some of you filled out a survey before this webinar, and there were even a couple in that survey results that I do not have on this list. However, Appflow integrates directly with all of them. So it doesn't matter what CI/CD platform you're using. Even if it's not on this list, you'll be able to pick 1 or all 3 of these Appflow products and use them in your existing suite. So what that looks like is you effectively use Appflow's products as steps in your CI/CD workflow. So your workflow kicks off in Jenkins, Azure DevOps, and does a couple special things that you need to do. You throw over to Appflow and say, hey, I'm going to need that iOS native binary. And then we return the native binary as output directly to your CI/CD workflow. And we can also save that as an artifact directly to your CI/CD tools artifact system. Now, I'm going to show you this in a little bit here. We're going to go through a full demo and kind of show you how this works. But you can just think of Appflow as providing really robust, super like infrastructure back, max up in the cloud for you, build stacks you don't have to manage yourself, as just a single step, just one line in your CI/CD pipeline that says, please give me an iOS binary. And we handle everything inside of that single command. Now, one of the things that is really important about this is I talked about how Appflow has a simple automations feature, and that's really built for you to start your CI/CD journey if you haven't started yet. A lot of times when you're a very large organization, you've already adopted Azure DevOps, you have a lot of process and tools already built into that. You already have your entire QA teams logging into Azure DevOps to look at the artifact system, to download the binary, to play with it. You might use, a human intervention step where a human being has to come into your CI/CD platform and hit like, I approve this to go to the next step. There are a lot of really cool features in these full-blown CI/CD tools because these CI/CD tools like Jenkins, like Bitbucket, like all of these, concentrate just on how we're running different jobs. So you can use all those cool features that you already use, that you already love, with Appflow's feature set baked in. So you don't have to have this like, oh man, I really want like this super easy native builds from Appflow, but I really like Jenkins in my setup there. I guess I'm out of luck. No, it's going to work. You can keep all of those cool features and use ours. So the way we pull this off is with our brand new cloud command line tool. So this is a tool that you install on your existing CI/CD pipeline. You can just install it as a simple step. It takes like less than a second to install this on basically any platform. And you offload all of those really hard steps for live updates, native builds, app store publishing to us as just those single line item steps. And we've built this in a way that really adheres to DevOps standards. So we've separated builds from deployments. All of the output from our systems is directly ported to the output of your system. And we've added all of the bells and whistles from a configuration standpoint with changing how those builds work. So we'll dive into some examples of that as we get to the demo, but let's do a quick high-level overview of how this is going to work. So first, on your system, you're going to install the Cloud Command Line tool. So we have the simple curl command here, where you run that on the machine either as a step, or if you want to make your own image and like install it in advance, you can. And then you're going to use that with an Ionic personal access token. And I'll show you that in a little bit, but a personal access token is just a custom token that lets us know who you are when you communicate from the Cloud Command Line tool to Appflow's tools and services. After you've set that up, kicking off builds and deployments is a relatively simple process, right? Now, there's going to be extra things that you add to the end of this, right? Extra parameters, but really it's just Ionic Cloud build iOS, Ionic Cloud deploy iOS, Ionic Cloud build web or deploy web for a live update. You'll have to configure some stuff in advance, and I'll walk you through that. But really, it's just kind of these basic commands that you can use directly in your CI/CD system. So with that, let's dive into an example. So I'm going to take screen sharing over from Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, give me just a second. So let's talk, before I kind of dive in and walk you through all of this, let's talk about what my goal here is, because I'm not going to tackle everything. I'm going to tackle one workflow that is actually the hardest workflow. We're going to tackle, I have my project in Azure DevOps as a Git repository or wherever it is. You can reuse what we're about to go through in any platform. Don't worry about the like Azure interface that I'm going to show you. It's pretty much the same in any system. So I have my repo in Azure, and my goal here is going to be to get an Apple binary in test flight on my phone. I literally want it to show up on my phone when a developer commits code. So developer commits code, we go through the entire process. It is on my phone. I've had to do nothing. I've had to click no buttons. It's fully automated inside of Azure DevOps. So I'm going to walk you through quick each step that you're going to have to take here. The first thing you're going to have to do is I'm in my Ionic dashboard here. That's just dashboard.ionicframework.com. And I've already set up an application, and I have connected to my repository in Azure DevOps. So you normally do this when you create an app, but if you're looking to like set it up, you can go settings, Git, choose your provider here, and connect your repository from Azure DevOps or whatever you're using as your Git repository. Next up, we're going to work on setting up the Cloud Command Line tools. You can find the docs for this at ionic.io/docs/appflow/CLI. And this links out to everything you're going to need to know. So I'm going to walk through some stuff today, but if you get lost and you're like, oh, I don't remember what that step is, go on over to the Appflow docs, check out the Cloud Client. It links out to everything you need to know. So like haven't set up live updates, cool. It's going to link out to the live updates documentation. It's got the simple setup instructions here, but kind of let's go to the next step. we're going to have to set a few things up in Appflow first. And one of those things is our signing certificates for the iOS native binary. So we're going to try to get an iOS production binary. You do use a production setup for test flight. And we're going to walk through kind of the instructions for getting that iOS cert and giving it to Ionic. So if you kind of walk through this, I'm just going to call out two things real quick. When you're creating an iOS certificate, you are going to have to do that for test flight, for production, right? You are going to have to register your app ID, just like the documentation says. You will not have to register a device, because we're not going to a specific developer's phone. We're going to test flight, to the App Store. So you can skip this step for this specific flow. You're then going to generate that CSR, kind of go through that process. And then when you get down to the certificate portion of setup, we're going to choose Apple distribution. Apple distribution is the one that actually lets us go to test flight. App development is the one that goes to a developer's phone. So just remember, choose Apple distribution if you're trying to get to test flight. Once we have all of this information, you kind of go through the rest of this, you'll upload that to Ionic in the build signing certificates section of your dashboard. So if I go like, hey, I want to add a new certificate, I'm going to do iOS, everything I just did in that documentation, I'll upload the app development store cert and the provisioning profile, and we'll save that. I've already done all that in advance. So I've set up a certificate and I've just named it test flight. You can name it whatever you want in the dashboard. But this is a production level cert that I'm going to be using for test flight. I even probably could have named this just like Production App Store Connect, because it's going to work for both. Up next, you're going to want to set up a destination. So if you go to deploy destinations, you can see I've set up this test flight destination here. Yet again, it's not specifically test flight, it's App Store Connect. You do that in a rather similar place. We're going to just say, hey, here's a new App Store destination. You're going to generate an app specific password for us. So you're not like logging directly in with your Apple account. You're giving us a single app specific password that you can revoke from Apple at any time. It links directly to the documentation on how to do that from this page. So you set up that information. Now we have test flight available as a destination. So we have the test flight, signing certificate. We have the test flight destination set up. Once you get to that point, you're going to want to generate a personal access token. You get to this by clicking your little face in the bottom left and going to personal settings and then personal access tokens. These are kind of the same as the app specific passwords for Apple we just talked about. So you're going to generate a new token. We only show that token one time. So like copy it someplace safe. I'll show you where we're going to put it in Azure DevOps here. You can see I was also playing around Bitbucket pipelines. I've kind of given each individual application I've connected its own token. If I go through and I delete this, then those requests from Azure DevOps, yet again, are revoked. So you can look at this as kind of like a single access token for any given app. So if we go over to Azure DevOps, I actually want to show you two different things here. First of all, let's go to the repository. This is just a standard repository for a capacitor application with Angular here. And I've gone over to Azure DevOps pipelines. If you're a Bitbucket, you go to Bitbucket pipelines. If you're Jenkins, Travis, go to the corresponding interface. They're all going to be very similar. And what I did was I set up a new pipeline here, and I just used Azure Repos Git for my only repository I have here. And then I just chose starter pipeline. Like whatever's the basic option here, just choose the basic option. Or if you have an existing pipeline, just go to your existing pipeline and edit that. So let's go back and edit this pipeline and walk through what's going on. So first off, this is just the starter pipeline from Azure DevOps. We're triggering on any commit to my master branch. We're just using the latest Ubuntu image. And then we're going to store a variable for later, because remember, we're going to want to do a build and a deployment as separate steps so that we can kind of adhere to the correct way of doing things in the DevOps culture, right? So we're going to save this iOS build ID as a variable that we're using between steps. Now, other systems have other ways of sharing variables. I know with Bitbucket, you are actually going to use their artifact system and save a file with the iOS build ID. And those files from artifacts are available in every single step. So you're going to want to look up how you share information in your CI/CD platform of choice. Step one, I didn't want to go create like a whole new image myself. I'm only installing one dependency on here, so I'm just doing it as a step. So this is that install step that goes out to Ionic, and it gets the version of the Ionic Cloud CLI for whatever system we're running on. So in this case, it's going to download a binary to this machine that's going to work on Ubuntu. We're just going to call that install Ionic Cloud Client. We'll look at what this does later. Then this script looks a little bit complicated, so let's walk through it. Let's start here. So follow along here. We're going to do Ionic Cloud build iOS. The type, we want an App Store build. We're trying to go to actual App Store Connect. We have my app ID from the dashboard. So if you were like looking at your dashboard, actually, let's look at the app here. It's this number right here, right? So we're going to build that app from the commit that is coming from Azure DevOps in this case. Yet again, look up the variable system for your CI/CD platform. It just so happens in Azure DevOps, it's build.source version is the commit that we need to pass to this command. So go build that commit. For the signing cert, I already set it up in advance. I showed you guys that. So we're just telling it to use the test flight signing cert. We are going to want to save the IPA file to Azure DevOps artifact system. So I'm going to tell it, just to make my life easy, save the IPA as app.ipa, just so it's easier for me to know where it is in the next step. We're going to want JSON output here, and that's because we're going to use the build ID that comes back from Appflow to deploy it in the next step. And then we have our token, Ionic_token, which is the personal access token you generated from the Ionic dashboard. Now, if we click, in this case in Azure DevOps, you can see variables. I added Ionic_token as a secret variable, and I'm just referencing it from within the build step here. So I've already set that up. It's a secret. They're never going to show it to me again either. So that's kind of what we're using right here. So that entire command, and I'll get to kind of the other fancy stuff around it in a second, but that command is what kicks off an iOS build in Appflow. One line, you are now going to have an iOS binary in the CI/CD platform. Now we want the build ID though. So I'm using JQ to parse the JSON that came back and get build ID as a variable. We're going to store that as build ID just on the system. And then don't ask me why each system is different. In Azure DevOps case, this echo VSO line is what sets this variable up here, this iOS build ID variable. So we echo this special fancy Azure DevOps stuff. Some systems are easier, right? Like I said, Bitbucket uses files. Your system might use just a better variable system. So we're setting iOS build ID to build ID and calling this whole thing run an iOS build. I'll show you this running in just a second here. Then we're going to say,
is that jQuery in the cloud? Did they finally bring that?
I have no idea why Azure DevOps kind of uses this. It was not fun to kind of figure out how to use, but yeah, that's like the special way that Azure DevOps saves variables in your CI/CD pipeline. So I have no idea. Then we're going to publish the artifact real quick, though. So we're going to just look in our working directory. We saved app.ipa. We're going to save that as iOS app. And then after that, like I said, our goal here is to get all the way to test flight. So we're going to deploy it. We're going to do Ionic Cloud deploy iOS, our app ID, the build ID from that variable. I don't know why it's much easier to read a variable than it is to set one. So we're just passing that build ID to the command line. Destination is that test flight destination I set up, and yet again, passing our token deploy to test flight. So in basically 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code in our CI/CD platform, we are getting an app built on a Mac in Appflow's cloud, deployed all the way to test flight on my phone, no human intervention at all. 4 lines. So super easy to actually get in your platform. Let's look at what that looks like running. So I already did this, so we don't have to sit and wait for a build. It just kind of kicks off the job. We'll go through each step quick. In less than a second, we install the version of the command line. If you want to lock this in, this blue line shows you how to lock in your version number when you're installing it. I didn't do that personally. Then we go to the run an iOS build in Appflow, and this is really cool. This is actually the output from the Mac running your build in Appflow. So even though we're in Azure DevOps, we don't have to go over to Appflow to see kind of the Mac building our app. So if there's an error building your application in here, like there's an error doing any of this stuff here, let's like find something like native specific, right? We're doing our cap sync for iOS. Then we're going through and like all of this is native iOS stuff, right? We're doing Swift package manager dependencies. If something fails in here, it's going to fail your pipeline. And you can log into Azure DevOps. You don't have to log into Appflow to come see what the issue was. So this, all of the output comes back. And then at the end, our artifact, we can see is saved as app.ipa. The next step that we did, that publish step, takes that and just uploads it to Azure DevOps artifact system. If we look at the artifacts for this build, we can see app.ipa was saved here. If I click this, it's just going to download the IPA file to my desktop. So you can keep your actual artifacts in your CI/CD platform as well. You don't have to go back to Appflow to get those. Then we get the deployment through to test flight. This again has to run on a Mac. So this Mac output is coming back to you. And remember, I'm running on Ubuntu. I'm on a Linux machine in Azure DevOps. This Mac is the output from Appflow's Mac infrastructure that we're maintaining for you. We're just porting it back to your view so that you see everything right in front of you. So we can see that that was indeed successful as well. And then it goes and it does some cleanup. And so all the cool stuff from Azure DevOps starts to kick off after this, right? We use that artifact system. I got an email that said like, hey, your build is successful. It went through the entire process. I hooked Azure up to Slack. So I think that's in your project settings. I just like connected it to our Slack account. I got a notification in Slack that my build succeeded. And then after Apple processed my test flight binary, I got an email on my personal test account that's linked to my actual phone that, cloud demo, native version 1, internal version 10 is ready to test on iOS, right? So if I go to, let me open up test flight on my phone real quick. If I go to test flight, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I have the new version of this app available on my phone. So start to finish, including all of the build time and me getting this email, you're looking at about 10 minutes. But all I did was commit code. I committed code to the master branch and it wound up on my phone in test flight. No human intervention required. You can set this up however you'd like, though. So remember, we're giving you the tools in the command line to be able to use Appflow's products. If you want to do special stuff between steps, if you want human intervention before you go to test flight, if you want, some other integration with, let's say you had a binary security scanning tool, right? So like after that binary exists on IPA, you want to run your enterprise's internal security scanner, you'd have a step here that says run internal security scanner, and you'd pass it app.ipa and it'd go and it would scan it. So you get the full power of your own custom pipeline, but you don't have to worry about the Appflow specific features. They're all just one-liners to use live updates, perform a web build, perform that web deploy for live update, the native build for Android, for iOS. I showed you the most complicated version here, right? You have to go through and get that cert for an app. If we were just doing an Android debug binary, I would have been able to skip all of the setup, and I would literally just run Ionic Cloud build Android debug with my app ID and my commit, and it would just run. So all of this is completely configurable to you and what you want to accomplish in your own CI/CD platform.
The other thing to mention too, Matt, is and what I love about it not being tied to any particular app CI/CD platform is, this is one example. This is Azure DevOps, but as you can see, this following any other example for other platforms are very similar. It's just like Matt said, combining it with your own existing pipelines and using it, mix and match whatever steps you need. So thank you to everyone that replied to our email, asking about what platforms. We had a whole different array of responses, and sure, this is all, we only have time for Azure DevOps today, but if you're using any other platform, the steps are very similar, both conceptually and literally the commands that Matt showed for the Cloud CLI. So just want to point that out.
Definitely. And, like I said, Bitbucket is one I've personally been playing with as well. So later this week, I'll actually be putting up a Bitbucket pipeline specific tutorial in our documentation. So keep on the lookout in the documentation for any other examples for these other providers, or let us know kind of what you're using, and we'll see what's up. But they're all very similar, right? You'll use variables or files to store build IDs. You want to use the artifact system. You might want to turn on the Slack integration. Everything else is very the same. Install the cloud command line tool, run your one-liners. So it's super easy. So with that, if you wanted to get started and kind of check this out, go to ionic.io/Appflow to learn more about not only the Appflow products, but how this integrates with CI/CD. Like I mentioned as well, if you want to look at the docs specifically for the cloud command line tool, go to ionic.io/docs, scroll down, click Cloud CLI, and you'll see the documentation for how all of this stuff works. So with that, I think we can jump over and do some Q&A. So if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A tab or in chat, and Neko and I can spend a few minutes asking or answering them. and we can go from there.
Sounds good. Well, let's get right to it. So we've got a great question from Martin. Thank you. Does Appflow support all Cordova plugins, such as SQLite or any plugin in terms of like the build process? Yeah.
Yes. So we're actually unique compared to most other Cordova or capacitor build platforms. I know some platforms in the past, particularly like PhoneGap's build system, which doesn't exist anymore. They try to make your builds go like as fast as humanly possible, but with no customization kind of available at all, right? They're literally, you don't get to make your Cordova shell with those other tools. They have like a prepackaged shell with a prepackaged set of native plugins. That is not how Appflow works. Appflow takes your source code as the source of truth and performs a legitimate full native build from that source code. So I don't care what plugins from Cordova you have, from capacitor you have. If it's a capacitor app and you wrote custom native code, that's all okay. Appflow will support that out of the box because we're performing real complete native builds. We're not doing this like weird shell swap thing like some of the other native building platforms.
Yep. And I believe with capacitor projects, because aren't we building those native projects that are committed to the repo as well, which is how we're able to build custom native code or really anything else you've included. Another benefit for capacitor there. But yeah, we're just using that as a source of truth. So, and of course, building it, avoid the works on my machine problem. Exactly. What I love about Appflow, especially when I collaborate with like Matt here or anyone else on the team, is having that shared hub that you can look at for, where all your builds, updates, everything's in one spot. So you always know what's going on as a team. Let's see. Vidyesh said, nice and simple. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Got some more questions coming in, Matt. Alex is asking if we're going to share the recording after the session. Absolutely. So with any Ionic event or webinar or presentation, we always send an email out, usually later in the same day. Once we might have to do some post-processing on the video and whatnot and upload it. But yes, usually later today. They'll always be able to find it over email and on YouTube and in our resource center. Sid, let's see, man, has a good question. Is it possible to deploy to the store using Appflow, but the build has taken place on their machine?
Really good question. So right now, for both live updates and for native binary builds, both of those things, the web build has to be performed by Appflow and the native build has to be performed by Appflow as well. However, we are definitely starting to get some requests as we launch the cloud command line tool for people who will kind of want to do both of those parts themselves. There's some workarounds for live updates where you can just like commit your pre-built code, but the native binary build system is still a requirement for App Store publishing. Keep your ear out though. Next year at some point we might look at making those more like you can send us the artifact you already built and still use the deployment service, right? We're really, our goal with Appflow over the next year with the cloud command line tool is to make it so you can use the exact bits and pieces you wanted. So in this case, I want to use my own CI/CD platform. CloudCI lets you do that. You sending us artifacts is something that might be interesting. I think we might look at it next year.
Nice. Yeah, and that touches on a great point, Matt. This is just the initial rollout. And what I love about our teams is we're always interested in hearing from you what you need, what your use cases are, especially as we saw with CI/CD. In general, every company's needs are different, right? Every team has set up different pipelines, which is also, again, why we designed it the way we did to make sure we could be as flexible as possible, right, Matt? Look towards the future when you really have something that has to meet a lot of needs for a lot of different customers. Cool. We got a couple more questions coming in. Mark's asking a great one about NX mono repos. Does Appflow understand and support them, like giving a special build command from package.json and or paths to the root of the app?
Yes. So we support mono repos in a generic sense. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to ionic.io/docs/appflow, click on cookbooks, and then click on mono repo support. And that's where you're going to find our custom configuration file that works with any mono repo style. Even if you're just using, like, I call them like simple folders, right? You're not using like kind of a management tool like NX. You're literally just have different folders in your repo. You can configure it to work with like NX, simple folders, Lerna, doesn't really matter what it is. You have control to tell us what commands to run to get your mono repo to work. So it should be just fine.
Nice. Yeah, and that cookbook section, anything like that, that's ancillary, other kind of cool, guides that allow you to work better or with different unique use cases are in that section too. So lots of good advice and other guides in there. Kevin, hello, Kevin. Nice to hear from you. We've talked about a test flight for iOS. What's the recommended way to download dev and QA builds for Android? So can the solution support having many different dev and QA builds available at the same time, supporting multiple source control branches, and or to compare changes between builds?
Yep. So we see our customers pull this off in a variety of ways, right? So first off, like, how do I do it, right? What's the distribution look like? We have people that use our App Store publishing feature to just go to Google Play Beta, and they have their QA testers enrolled in the Google Play Beta program for their specific application. So just like Apple has Test Flight, Google Play Beta is the equivalent on Google's side. So check that out if you just kind of want to look at the official kind of beta distribution mechanism there. However, we also have Q&A teams that are logging directly into the CI/CD tool. So not necessarily Appflow. Not many QA teams have direct access to Appflow, but a lot of them have access to like the Azure DevOps artifact system to go and download the explicit artifacts that they know were kicked off from like a certain commit on a certain branch, that is going to be running dev or QA. So if that's the case, and you've already kind of got a system for that, I recommend doing what I did where I saved the binary in the CI/CD platform to the artifact system. And you can have your team go in and choose those. I also recommend for if you're testing like multiple things, right? Like you have, dev connected to like a dev backend, and then you have staging connected to the staging backend, and production connected to the production backend. Check out native configs in Appflow. So ionic.io/doc/appflow. Look for native configs under the native binary section, I believe. And we actually have a system built into Appflow that will change the binary ID on the fly and the name of the app on the fly for you. So your QA team could have all three binaries installed on their phone at the same time. The rule is it has to be a different binary ID. So you'd have, com.yourwebsite.awesomeappdev, awesomeappstaging, awesomeappprod. And then that's hard to tell the difference on your phone, right? If they're all named the same thing. So you'd have like your app dev, your app staging, your app prod. And then you can pass that native config as a variable to the cloud command line tool to specify which one you'd like to perform. So you can just run 3 different commands, get all 3 builds, save all 3 of them to the artifact system. And now you've got all 3 apps that can be installed on one QA person's phone without kind of having to manage swapping anything out yourself. So highly recommend checking out native configs if your goal is more than one binary on one device.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, talking about, that's another point with mobile and CI/CD challenges, right? Compared to websites where you just have subdomains or just easy, literally a link between environments, so much easier to pass those around than managing a physical device in that space. So I think that's a great kind of way to solution around that. And I dropped a link to the docs for that page in the chat, by the way. So yeah, TLDR is yes, we can have, all those builds available at one time. In fact, when you connect your repo to Appflow, we automatically hook into and are aware of all branches from the repo, right? Yeah. So you'll see that there's a commits page that shows every commit, and then it clearly, labeled with what the branch is and other details like the author, the commit message, like all the stuff that you'd expect from Git. And then from there, it's kind of, automating it, or choose your own adventure and pick a commit and make a web build, a native build, basically whatever you want to do. So on top of everything Matt said, yeah. Cool. So I think that's about all we have time for today. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for all the great questions and for joining us. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, we are the Mats from Ionic. Thanks so much. Look out for that recording soon, and go check out Appflow at ionic.io/Appflow. So thank you again.
Thanks.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.